The great iron gates shut with a hideous crash, and the sound of their boots could be heard ringing under the arch leading into the courtyard. A second bunch disappeared through the next gateway. The remaining 5, quickening their pace, ran off down Fonterney Street and vanished into the distance. Finally, the last runaway appeared at the crossroads, wearing faded gold shoulder straps. Nikolka's keen eyes recognized him at a glance as the commanding officer of the 2nd Squad of the Ist Detachment, Colonel Nai Turs. "Colonel!" Nikolka called out to him, puzzled and at the same time relieved. "Your cadets are running away in a panic." Then the most amazing thing happened. Nai Turs ran across the trampled snow of the intersection. The skirts of his greatcoat were looped back on both sides, like the uniform of the French infantry. His battered cap had fallen back on the nape of his neck and was only held on by the chin strap. In his right hand was a revolver, whose open holster flapped against his hip. Unshaven for several days, his bristly face looked grim and his eyes were set in a squint. He was now close enough for Nikolka to make out the zigzag braid of a Hussar regiment on his shoulder straps. Nai Turs ran right up to Nikolka and with a sweeping movement of his free left hand he tore off from Nikolka's shoulders first the left and then the right shoulder strap. Most of the threads tore free, although the right strap pulled a lump of the greatcoat material with it. Nikolka felt such a pull that he was instantly aware of the remarkable strength of Nai Turs' hands. The force of the movement made Nikolka lose his balance and he sat down on something that gave way beneath him with a shriek. It was Ivashin the machine gunner. Confusion broke out and all that Nikolka could see were the astonished faces of the cadets milling around above him. Nikolka was only saved from going out of his mind at that moment by the violence and urgency of Nai Turs' behavior. Turning to face the disorganized squad, he roared an order in a strange, cracked voice. Nikolka had an irrational feeling that a voice like that must be audible for miles, if not over the whole city. "Cadets! Listen and do as I tell you. Rip off your shoulder straps, your cap badges and cartridge pouches and throw your rifles away. Go through the backyards from Fonterney Street towards Razazaya Street and make your way to Podol. To paddle, you hear? Tear up your identity papers as you go, hide, disperse and tell anyone you meet on the way to do the same. Then, brandishing his revolver, Nai Turs added in a voice like a cavalry trumpet. Down Fontany Street, don't go any other way. Get away home and lie low. The fight's over. On the double. For a few seconds the squad could not take it in, then the cadets' faces turned absolutely white. In front of Nikolka, Ivashin ripped off his shoulder straps, his cartridge pouches flew over the snow and his rifle crashed down against the curbstone. Half a minute later the crossroads was littered with belts, cartridge pouches and someone's torn cap, and the cadets were disappearing into the gateways that would lead through backyards into Razizaya Street. With a flourish Nai Turs thrust his revolver back into its holster, strode over to the machine gun, squatted down behind it, swung its muzzle round in the direction from which he had come and adjusted the belt with his left hand. From his squatting position he turned, looked up at Nikolka and roared in fury. Are you deaf? Run! Nikolka felt a strange wave of drunken ecstasy surge up from his stomach and for a moment his mouth went dry. I don't want to, Colonel, he replied in a blurred voice, squatted down, picked up the ammunition belt and began to feed it into the machine gun. Far away, from where the remnants of Nai Turs' squad had mine running, several mounted men pranced into view. Their horses seemed to be dancing beneath them as though playing some game, and the gray blades of their sabers could just be seen. Nai Turs cocked the bolt, the machine gun spat out a few rounds, stopped, spat again and then gave a long burst. Instantly bullets whined and ricocheted off the roofs of houses to right and left down the street. A few more mounted figures joined the first ones, but suddenly one of them was thrown sideways towards the window of a house, another's horse reared on its hind legs to an astonishing height, almost to the level of the second-floor windows, and several more riders disappeared altogether. Then all the others vanished as though they had been swallowed up by the earth. Nai Turs dismantled the breech block, and as he shook his fist at the sky his eyes blazed and he shouted. Those swine at headquarters, run away and leave children to light. He turned to Nikolka and cried in a voice that struck Nikolka like the sound of a muted cavalry trumpet. "Run for it, you stupid boy. Run for it, I say." He looked behind him to make sure that all the cadets had already disappeared, then peered down the road from the intersection to the distant street running parallel to Brest-Litovsk Street and shouted in pain and anger. "Ah, hell." Nikolka followed his glance and saw that far away on Kaitskaya Street, among the bare snow-covered trees of the avenue, lines of gray-clad men had begun to materialize and were dropping to the ground. Then a sign above Nai Turs and Nikolka's heads on the corner house of Fonerny Street, reading, Berta Yakovlevna. Prince dental surgeon swung with a clang and a window pane shattered somewhere in the courtyard of the same house. Nikolka noticed some lumps of plaster bouncing and jumping on the sidewalk. Nikolka looked questioningly at Colonel Nai Turs for an explanation of these lines of gray men and the fragments of plaster. Colonel Nai Turs' response was very strange. He hopped up on one leg, waved the other as though executing a waltz step, and an inappropriate grimace, like a dancer's fixed smile, twisted his features. The next moment Colonel Nai Turs was lying at Nikolka's feet. A black fog settled on Nikolka's brain. He squatted down and with a dry, tearless sob tried to lift the colonel by the shoulders. In doing so he noticed that blood was seeping through the colonel's left sleeve and his eyes were staring up into the sky. "Colonel, sir,"